I want to share a story that happened in my city, or to be more precise, with my friend who was a military man and participated in the fighting. His name was Brandon Benson. We went to the same school and played on the same football team. When we grew up, he connected his life with the Army and recaptured the girl from his friend, whom he later married, and everything seemed fine until this story took a dark and frightening turn. My relationship with Adam was complicated. Yes, I admit it sounds absurd, but our friendship was always intertwined with rivalry. We were more friends than competitors, until we started taking an interest in girls, which added an edge to our relationship. It seemed we were hopelessly drawn into the whirlwind of similar feelings for the same girls, and that was a problem. A big problem. This dynamic originated in our school years, when Adam went to North Middle School and I went to West School. I was known as Harry Benson. I got my name from my father, who, incidentally, won a tidy sum playing poker during his honeymoon with my mother. This fortune helped my parents provide me with a pretty good childhood. My full name is John Brandon Benson, but thanks to my dad's luck and cards, everyone started calling me simply Dill. As for Adam, he came from a wealthy family. His father was a businessman who was quite successful and influential. Adam had everything a child his age could dream of, but what he really needed was brains. In turn, raised on a modest farm north of the Big Canal on 28th Street, I grew up in circumstances where money was tight. Our house was small, my mom took care of the home and raised my 3 younger sisters, and my dad worked as a draftsman, not exactly a lucrative job, but he liked it and my mom always supported him. Our family connected with Adam's family through our mother's charitable activities. My mom actively participated in managing one of the largest charity foundations, a commitment dictated by my great-grandfather's will. This led to our families frequently gathering together. Thus, I had to get acquainted with Adam, who I didn't like from the start, but we had to interact because our parents got along well. Adam and I both were into sports. I was quite strong and had good coordination, while Adam was 5 inches taller and only 18 pounds heavier than me, but this didn't give him any advantage. We played football and basketball at school, always on different teams. We tried to be friends, though I openly disliked him. My mom constantly told me to be on good terms with Adam, but he made me sick. At that time, I was dating Patty, a girl every high schooler dreamed of. She was incredibly attractive, but as a teenager, it wasn't just her looks that drew me in. It was also her ability to keep a conversation going. We could talk for hours about all sorts of nonsense, and we even started to flirt a little. I was head over heels in love with her and planned to ask her to prom, hoping to take our relationship to the next level there. However, by delaying my decision until the last moment, I found out that Adam had beaten me to it and had already asked her out. This revelation really angered me, especially since I was unaware that Adam knew Patty. A few weeks after prom, Adam and I met for dinner at his house where he openly talked about Patty, boasting about how great things were between them. I asked him to change the subject. Later, we went to the park where Adam continued to brag about his achievements with Patty, mentioning he was her first, which he enjoyed. During the conversation, I couldn't hold back and punched him, an emotional outburst, to which he responded with a powerful counterpunch, knocking me out. After this incident, our relationship became tense, swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Over the next year, our friendship had its ups and downs, especially during football games. Eventually, Adam considered going to college in Oklahoma, while I received an acceptance letter from Annapolis, which was a big surprise given that my academic achievements were rated higher than my sports performance. At that critical moment, with only 20 seconds left in the basketball game and our team in the lead, I knew I had to cover the opponent to prevent them from tying the score. But losing my balance, I found myself heading toward mid-court, leaving my ball unattended. Suddenly, Adam intercepted the ball and charged through our team's defense. Remembering Patty, I exerted all my effort to catch up to Adam but knew I was too late. At the moment of his shot, I was just a few steps behind him. But still, I attempted to stop him. My attempt failed, and I accidentally injured his arm, breaking both bones in his forearm. I was accused of foul play, but it didn't matter anymore, as the pass was completed and the game ended. It took Adam 2 years to recover from the injury, and that incident forever changed his attitude towards me. He lost the chance for a scholarship and eventually enrolled at Wichita State University, where he studied accounting and gave up sports. As for me, I went to Annapolis, and after finishing my studies, I chose to serve in the Marine Corps, coming home only for a month's leave before being deployed to Vietnam. During that brief period, I led a carefree lifestyle and often hung out in clubs in my free time, sometimes returning home only in the morning. But one day, when I went to a club, I managed to meet my future wife there. That day, as I was enjoying a cigarette outside, my gaze fell on Adam. I nodded to him as a greeting, and he simply nodded back. He was dressed in the uniform of a junior lieutenant with golden patches and the Airborne Forces emblem. My uniform was blue, and I looked quite elegant in it. Adam was not alone. He was with a girl, a redhead beauty in a white blouse and a black miniskirt, whom I had never seen before. Her name was Cynthia, and she made an indelible impression. In the conversation, Adam recalled one of our old encounters when he easily beat me. I realized he was trying to belittle me in front of his new girlfriend, but this time I decided to act more skillfully. For trying to hurt me, I easily knocked him to the ground in front of Cynthia and offered her to dance, after which I spent the whole evening and then the night with her. Since then, I hadn't seen Adam for years, and Cynthia became my constant companion until my departure. Although our meetings were infrequent, they were unforgettable, and soon we got engaged. I was often sent to different parts of the world, which meant Cynthia had to constantly travel after me. But it seemed not to bother her at all. Her father, a vice president at Boeing, provided her with everything she needed, and we enjoyed every free minute together. Cynthia was incredibly passionate, and being young, I wasn't worried about her loneliness in my absence because I trusted her and knew she always had things to keep her busy. But my service had ended, and I was compelled to go into combat, with no certainty of when I would return. Therefore, for this period, Cynthia went back to her parents' house. I found myself working in hot spots, and everything around me changed: the environment, the smells, the climate. I left behind a world where Cynthia's love and passion were my sanctuary, and I plunged into the reality of combat, where every day was a struggle for survival. Cynthia and I, once during my leave, went to my parents' house. My mom told me that Adam had served in the 408th Airborne Regiment, and suggested I meet up with my long-lost childhood friend. She was unaware of the tension that had arisen between Adam and me, and meeting him was the last thing I desired. However, I assured my mom that I would try to see him, without delving into the details of our relationship. I didn't want to upset her. I remember one autumn our base was closed for repairs and expansion. By the time I arrived, Vietnamese engineers had already managed to build and extend the runway, paved with aluminum mats. The base had turned into a fortress with fortifications and machine gun points, surrounded by dense enemy fire. Water was supplied to the base from a stream located beyond the northern perimeter and stored in large rubber tanks. I was assigned to work in the T3 Reconnaissance Battalion. My task was to quickly translate captured enemy documents, requiring me to actively search for these documents, often in terrifying and life-threatening conditions. But I endeavored to do my job because the pay was very substantial. About 2 weeks after arriving at the front, I was offered to take a photo with a snake that had been killed the day before. This moment reminded me of the cruelty of combat and how it had changed my life. But thanks to the experience gained among the soldiers, I learned to survive. Later, after 6 months of service, I was sent to meet with other translators. Our goal was to improve the quality of translations and to look for patterns in the collected data to make our work more effective. During the flight between military bases, my helicopter landed on a platform right in the midst of a mortar barrage. I rushed to find cover, and suddenly a sharp pain pierced my back. It was accompanied by a loud explosion and air pressure from a shell that had exploded nearby. I remember fragments of what happened next, how I lay on the ground. Then 2 soldiers from my brigade ran up to me, and how I was transported for a very long time, and in just a moment, I woke up in the hospital. All of it seemed like a terrible dream, and I thought I was going to die. In the hospital, I was given a terrifying diagnosis: a severed spinal cord. The doctor's words sounded like a sentence. I had become disabled, losing my independence, and I didn't have long to live. I wish I had died, was my first thought when the doctor left. Suicidal thoughts took over until I started interacting with other veterans whose lives were shattered like mine. I saw that some had situations far worse than mine, but it only temporarily relieved the burning pain inside. I learned to hide my feelings and express optimism, although inside I harbored plans to rid myself of the pain and humiliation. Cynthia, my wife, was informed about which hospital I was in, and every day I waited for her to come, needing her support. But everything changed the day Adam, who had lost an eye in an ambush, walked into my room. Despite his injury, he looked strong and reminded me of a pirate. By that time, I harbored no resentment towards him, so we just talked about everything under the sun. And at some point, I asked him to get a bottle of alcohol to continue our conversation. Adam returned an hour later with a bottle and told me he had danced with Cynthia when he was relaxing in a club and saw her alone. "Dude, I don't think she's planning to come visit you," he said with a smirk, suggesting I call her. Torn between the desire to drink myself to death and throwing the bottle at Adam, I chose to drink, trying to drown my sorrows in alcohol. I couldn't argue with him and was confined to the bed. I hadn't seen Cynthia in 4 months, and those were the most terrible 4 months of my life. When Adam left the ward, I was on the verge of emptying a bottle of whiskey when it slipped from my hands. I realized I was losing consciousness, which became the reason to call for a nurse. Due to the alcohol, I nearly went to the other side, but the nurses, gathering all their strength, pulled me out of this predicament. I spent 2 days in tears before I regained my strength to show my resilience and called Cynthia to tell her that she could visit me and I was waiting for her. She apologized to me, saying she thought I was still in a coma, so she didn't want to disturb me. A week later, Cynthia came to the hospital to visit me. I was happy to see her and didn't want to confront her about anything. I just wanted her to be with me. She visited me for half an hour every day. When I asked why she didn't come more often, she said that the atmosphere here was too gloomy and the smell made her feel sick. I was concerned about what she was doing with the rest of her time, but I was powerless to change anything. I understood that if I started asking too many unnecessary questions, she would simply stop coming. After being discharged, we settled into a new house. We even installed a ramp for my convenience, and I began to feel like we were becoming a complete family again. Taking care of me was hard on Cynthia. Sometimes I saw an expression of annoyance on her face, which deepened my wounds. I understood that it was difficult for her to care for a husband who was disabled. She began to spend her evenings with friends, leaving me alone. I tried to ask her to spend an evening with me a couple of times, but it was as if she wasn't listening. And because of this, dark thoughts haunted me day after day. The doctor suggested that I had only a few years left. With 2 serious injuries, I regularly visited the Veterans Hospital, where they temporarily helped me cope with the ailments, staving off death. Cynthia continued to go out, spending long nights away from home. When I tried to talk to her, she brushed me off. "Sorry, but I'm bored here. I'm too young to sit at home all the time." It was as if she didn't understand me and what was happening to me. I was ready to forgive her any escapade, but it seemed she didn't care about me anymore. Watching her prepare for another night out, I realized I completely didn't know what she was doing, spending so much time and money on preparations for evenings that cost us more than we could afford. She preferred to dress in tight-fitting outfits that accentuated every line of her figure, and I found myself thinking more and more that it was time to end everything. However, I wanted to end it gracefully, so when an old service buddy came to visit me at my home, the most interesting thoughts crept into my mind. We had been deceiving each other for quite some time until I decided to speak frankly. "Listen, I need a gun, any kind you can find." His look was full of understanding. He knew what I wanted. He returned with a Colt pistol and a box of bullets, though I didn't need that many. 1 bullet would have been enough to end my suffering, and not just mine, but also Cynthia's, who had become my wife. but now her husband was a disabled man who had become utterly uninteresting to her. I hid the pistol in a sports bag and left it in the closet. Cynthia never showed interest in its contents. But then came the night when my anger reached its limit. Cynthia was about to leave, unexpectedly mentioning that an old friend would pick her up for dinner and dancing. "Who is it? Who's coming for you?" I asked. "You'll see in a minute. You'll be surprised," she replied with a suspicious smile. I asked her to stay home, but she brushed me off. "Leave me. I'm short on time. I need to get ready." 10 minutes later, there was a knock. At the door stood a guy in a new tracksuit with an eye patch. "What are you doing here?" I exclaimed. With a smile, he replied, "I'm taking Cynthia to dance since you can't even stand up and she loves to dance. And I'll give her what you can't, but if you haven't figured out what I mean, then that's your problem, old man." They laughed and, holding hands, left. Before leaving, Cynthia said they would return here after the date, asking me not to smoke in the bedroom so it wouldn't smell of cigars. Her companion added that I could watch them if I wanted, saying it would be as close to sex as I could get. I threw an ashtray at him, but he dodged, and they left, laughing. Left alone, I approached the closet and took the pistol, always kept loaded. Sitting by the bed, I began to remove the bullets, wiping them on the sheet until they shone. A tear fell on my colt, and then I realized I was crying. At that moment, I understood that I was ready to end my life, seeing nothing ahead but inevitable death. I started reloading the shining symbols of death into the pistol, realizing I was no longer needed in this world, essentially becoming a useless person who could no longer bring any benefit to it. I checked the chamber, making sure it was clean, although it didn't matter at that moment. Trying to insert the barrel into my mouth and misjudging the force, I accidentally broke a tooth which distracted me with pain, and I quickly removed it, wiping the end of the barrel from saliva. Reflecting, I decided it would be best to press the muzzle to my temple. Slowly pressing the trigger, my hand trembled and I backed off, lighting a cigar with an unpleasant smell and blowing smoke into the pillow. Realizing I needed a bit more courage, I went to the kitchen for a strong drink. It was pure alcohol. My hand still trembled as I tried to pour the alcohol, spilling more than getting it into the glass. A sip of the liquor made me choke, but it was pleasant. Again pressing the pistol to my head, I realized I couldn't make myself pull the trigger. Suddenly it dawned on me. I understood what I really wanted from life and how I wanted to end it. Setting aside the pistol, I leaned back in the chair, enjoying the taste of the strong drink, and lit a cigarette. A smile, which someone could mistake for a grimace, appeared on my face. After a few hours, having worked out my plan, I was ready to act. Hearing the sound of a car, I knew it was time. Cynthia walked in, followed by Adam. Her appearance spoke for itself. Seeing me, Cynthia was outraged by my smoking. Adam closed the door. I took the pistol and aimed it at him. "Come here," I said confidently. Adam, understanding my intentions, approached and knelt down. "Don't worry, Adam, I'm not going to kill you," I assured him before hitting his ear not too hard, so he would lose consciousness for a while. I didn't want his death. I needed to convey my point of view. I didn't want to harm anyone. But their laughter and mockery had done their job. I conducted a similar operation on Cynthia. Using wire, I tied their legs so that the wire acted as a tourniquet and made 2 shots directly into the knee. My aim was not to let them bleed out, but rather to ensure they would remain confined to wheelchairs for the rest of their lives. Perhaps they could even use my own wheelchair to save money, which Cynthia will now be lacking. After completing the procedure, I called emergency services and reported the shooting at our address, omitting whether the shooter was still inside. Then I turned on the lights throughout the house, opened the front door, and returned to the bedroom, smiling in anticipation, realizing this was the final stage of my plan. A sense of calm, unfamiliar to me until that moment, filled me as I heard the sirens approaching and the screeching brakes of cars. One of the police officers approaching the door exclaimed in surprise, causing a commotion in the street. From my wheelchair, I fired at the ceiling to avoid hitting anyone. The return fire made me feel a piercing pain in my shoulder, followed by a blinding flash from one of the officer's weapons. Later, newspapers reported the tragedy. A man was killed in a confrontation with the police, and 2 people in the house were seriously injured. The emergency call led the police to a house with an open door, where they were met with gunfire. None of the officers were injured, but it was announced at Wesley Hospital that the injured, a man and a woman, would likely lose their legs below the knee and would have to spend the rest of their lives in wheelchairs. The details of the incident remain under question, with further investigation pending.
That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments about this story. It will be interesting for us to read it. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new, equally interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!